right.
It's recording, Mark.
Nice job. Appreciate you being able to push the buttons every morning and just getting us off to a good start.
You're welcome. You might need to scoot a little closer to
Yeah. My feeling. What am I sounding like?
Quieter than.
Ooh. Well,
that's better.
I'm working on my mellow sound. Although that might put people to sleep. So yeah. Is that better?
It depends on if they have their quiet time kombucha in hand.
Exactly. I did get a text asking me, if I had any in stock.
Any quiet time kombucha?
Yes.
That's awesome. Who asked you that?
My mother-in-law, Linda. So, like you say, that was just a little sense of humor between the two of us.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
She gives us all the best comments.
There you go. Yes, indeed.
So you guys, got to step up on your commentary because Linda's got you all beat right now.
Yes, indeed. Lizzie is definitely in that running as well.
Yes.
And so family members.
Hers are more thoughtful and or corrective.
Like you say, there is no doubt. She's an editor for our program in many ways.
That's right.
And it's a good thing.
Yeah. And spoiler.
And the beauty of it is when they come in, I can just kind of forward them to you because it's like, that's way above my pay grade as far as how I see a podcast is concerned.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like I had the outro accidentally at the beginning and the intro at the end.
Yep.
Megan and Lizzie both let me know that.
There you go.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
It's good to have that checks and balances.
It is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Humbles us.
It's easy to slip some mistakes in there. So.
Yeah. Oh, I give you that.
Yeah. I'm surprised I haven't got more typo corrections and stuff like that.
Well.
Although I use a thing called Grammarly, which generally catches it. But
yeah, that's exactly kind of along the lines I was thinking. Days of spell check. The biggest thing I get is, the wrong word, in a spell check type thing.
But, and Grammarly will catch that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like spell/grammar checker.
Yeah.
Give you suggestions for better ways to put it. But
and for me, it's normally speak to text when that happens.
Yeah, where it confuses. Yeah, I hear you.
Lizzie and Lindsay is one that's like frustrates me every time. It's like sometimes I let it loose and it's like I hate it when that happens.
You're now Lindsay. I'm sorry.
No, she's never Lindsay. It's like, when I see it.
Spoiler alert, Lindsay is going to be on the podcast soon.
Lizzie?
No, Lizzie.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. She's doing a lot of learning about health and science, but kind of particularly engaged in brain
neurobiology.
Yeah, neurobiology. Yes. So we thought, hey, we want to talk about some brain stuff.
Yeah.
And it would be cool to have her on.
Yeah.
So again, a little bit of spoiler. If you want to hear from this Lizzie you've been hearing about, she'll be on in a few weeks.
Yeah. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations. And today, I'm excited about today.
Are you? You just found out about today.
Well,
and you're still excited. I like it.
I've been excited about this opportunity you have.
Oh.
And so I'm excited about the idea of kind of broadening the audience for this opportunity. So,
sure.
Do you mind if I share a little bit about what you're doing?
No, you go right ahead.
So tonight?
Sunday night.
Yes,
it will be May 7th.
Okay, Sunday night, excuse me. Mark will be presenting a little bit on some stuff at a church where they're going to have, I guess, it's a parent night. Is it going to be a panel? Is that what you said?
Not as much as I had. Okay. It's going to be a small group breakout.
Why don't you tell us about it, Mark?
To the best of my knowledge.
It's going to be on Wednesday night and it's going to be a panel.
I understand is it's going to be a parent night.
Cool.
There's going to be a meal, and then there's going to be during that meal, there's going to be a video presentation.
Yeah.
Basically about how technology, affects, children and developmentally, how that, just how our social media culture is affecting the next generation and in many ways setting them up for addiction. And so, like you say, that's what the video will be about. And then they'll break it out into, small group discussion from there, based on, babies, elementary age, junior high, senior high type families, as far as where they're at. And then I'll be following that up, small group discussions, kind of following that up with, where I see it going, or, just to be able to be a voice, to be able to speak to what I see as a counselor, working with, marriages, families, kids, and what I've seen and that kind of thing. And then kind of basically wrapping up with kind of a Q&A time as far as, what parents can do and that kind of thing. So that's how they even, probably 5 to 7 would be that time frame. And just kind of looking forward to it. Been really doing it's been good. Because I recognize, in the day to day, you can kind of do the thing. And I respect the fact that, if you just do the same thing over and over again, you don't always go out and look for the new research or look for the new thing. I mean, I probably spend as much time, with my quiet time stuff, and, new ideas come through that, devotionals and so forth, but I'm not necessarily always going out there and looking at the latest research and that kind of thing. So it's been a good little opportunity for me to just kind of invest again and look at some of this stuff. And it's, it's been convicting as far as, it definitely brings back the timeless aspects of, when I'm looking at a cultural dynamic, I, routinely think of Esther, and stuff like that, people in scripture, for such a time as this, that I fully believe that, we are born when we're born for a purpose, and, we are given the children we are given because we are uniquely designed to raise those children. None of this is by accident. None of this is a mistake, and none of this is just a biological experience that, we're just here to gratify ourselves and, and die. That kind of thing. Yeah. So it's just, I really have been thinking about it from that time, from that aspect of, okay, what are we called to? What are we to be? Well, how do we address some of these dynamics that, are some of these social dynamics as families, as parents, as children, that kind of thing. So that's kind of where my mind has been, in the process of, how our brain works, developmental stuff for kids and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, like you say, it's good to have an excuse sometimes to have to do some research and spend some time looking at science and all that. That's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I said, I wanted to have the opportunity to, I guess, hear some of what you've been thinking about and preparing, even if it's stuff that ends up on the cutting floor, like kind of the the B-roll stuff.
Yes.
Or even the stuff you want to share there. And if, as a listener, you're looking for an invite, it will be over by the time.
Yeah, that's true.
By the time this is released. So don't ask.
Yeah.
You can't go. But you know what you do get? You get to listen to this podcast.
There you go.
So how are you getting into it? Like because I know the video is going to set up a lot of the conversation for you, I think, right?
Yeah. And it's going to set it up. But I think for me, it's my desire, what I'm feeling, kind of led to speak about is hope.
Yeah.
In the midst of this culture.
You guys have heard this from Mark before. He's all about that hope.
I guess what, brings it back to me from a timeless, because this is part of my dynamic is I believe, there's the aspects of what is timely and what is timeless.
Yeah.
And for me,
those are
I wouldn't necessarily put them on the, continuum dynamic. Because
they can be both.
Yeah, I can see it. It's that aspect of being aware of both at the same time.
Gotcha.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so recognizing our culture, is recognizing the effects and what is currently going on in our culture is a timely dynamic. Mm-hmm. And when I look at it's just strange that I'm even speaking about technology. So that to you is a credit, Justin, because like you say, I wouldn't have found myself here years ago, or I wouldn't have thought I would. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. But I think in our culture, okay, technology is here. So that's part of the timely dynamic. Mm-hmm. And I think, as parents, and I honestly, and granted, I'm probably speaking to grandparents. I know I'm speaking to some grandparents, but at the same time, I realize that may not be, much of our listenership. Grandparents actually who are raising their grandchildren.
Yeah. I
think that's a dynamic of our culture that is newer.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see that from a historical. I mean, granted, not that it didn't happen, but I don't think it's happened previously. Maybe in a war dynamic, World War II. Where granted, children lost their parents. And therefore other family members came. But I don't think we've seen what we see today on such a large scale. Mm-hmm. And so, I think about it in the context of the energy that we have to be parents. And I think there's a lot of energy involved to be able to raise children.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that, from a cultural timely dynamic, I feel for, parents, and then I feel for grandparents who are raising young children,
Yeah.
So I think that's an aspect of the timely, but there's so much of the, our social media dynamic that is, I just found out a new term is iGen. It's the group of kids who have been basically born, I believe it's since 1995. So basically a generation, from that point, we have a group of people who have been raised with smart technology. Yeah. So like the iPhone, the generation I. So, or iGen, there's books and so forth out, but you get the idea. And, this is new information.
Much like the millennial, or what's right before millennial?
Probably.
What's X? Is that right?
Yeah, something.
I think Generation X or millennial. So I think millennials were raised on computers, which is a new paradigm, right?
Yeah.
And Generation X, the number of people, kids who had access to computers was much lower. You had the Steve Jobs type people or whatever. Yeah. And that they're outliers because they had rare access to computers. Whereas my generation is like it's kind of that same shift, right? Yeah. Like we were raised on computers and had to learn that world. And now, like you said, iGen, I guess, raised on smartphones.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's cool.
And,
makes sense.
It does. And it's so, and I think that's where in this, in the timely part of it, I guess to put it politely, there has been a misleading of what this technology is and what it can do, to the developing mind.
Yeah.
And, you bring up Steve Jobs and, there's other people, in the tech industry. And the reality of it is, truth be told, Steve Jobs never allowed his kids on a screen.
Yeah.
So when you think about these people that are engineering this stuff, or, these, and there's education systems in Silicon Valley where, the execs send their kids to school that have no screen.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yes.
And they recognize the power that the screen had to create this, dopamine biofeedback loop that creates this addiction, for the screen.
Yep. And they have firsthand, view to the algorithms that are created and the science behind it. And
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that there's basically, engineers. Yes, there's engineers in rooms designing this stuff to make it as addictive as possible to keep you to be able to give them as much information as they can get about you, to make it as specific to you, to keep you in that loop as long as they can.
You know what's a little bit sad about that?
A lot.
Yeah. Okay, a lot of it. No, I'm just thinking about, okay, so how big is Facebook, Google, Twitter? You know, how big when it comes to money? And you wonder, like, where's that money go?
$50 million alone goes to lobbying.
Okay.
Yeah. That's just one statistic. I mean, that tells you how... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but, you know, from my perspective, that is an aspect of, okay, with this information, why isn't more being done as far as saying, well, hang on, if it's not good for their children, why is it so prevalent? And why are we not curbing this? You know, and granted, there's, you know, even and granted, the version of TikTok is different. But, you know, China is actually creating limitations around their children's exposure to TikTok.
Right.
And yet, you know, we're talking hours, you know, that young children are spending, you know, YouTube, TikTok, that kind of thing, you know, Facebook, you know, and go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was trying to get at is the amount of money that is spent on science by these organizations.
Oh, sure.
We don't have any idea. No. And what's sad to me is there's so much social science that is hit behind these locked walls in order to build these corporations, that they know a lot about social science that's not published, right?
Sure.
Where a lot of these engineers and scientists, you know, if outside of those locked walls would be producing pretty amazing stuff. Yeah, they are, but it's all behind locked walls. And obviously we're learning, and scientists are studying from the outside of these walls, these impacts and all this stuff. But a lot of the stuff that I would say we're finding out and is being published is stuff they already knew. That's why they built it that way. The algorithms and all that, like, came from that study, and then they validated those studies, and then they continued to hone those technologies in order to do those things. And we're out here monitoring it and going, oh, we see a pattern here, and you're like, yep. So it's because it's working. It's designed that way. And
exactly.
I just think it would be amazing to if that information, that science was able to be published and available. You know what I mean? But sadly, that won't be the case.
In some ways, it is the case, because what we know about that process has been leaked by executives who are leaving that industry, being able to say, no, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Yes. You know, and those are in different, you know, Facebook, you know, there's just different people, executives who are leaving, basically saying, no, I don't want to be part of this promotion anymore. I don't want to be part of this, I'll call it an agenda, if you will.
Wash their hands of it.
Yeah. And so I think, you know, that's really kind of bringing some of this information to the forefront. And, you know, not that this hasn't been, you know, going on for a while, but I just think about it. And so that's the timely dynamic, you know, and I'm thinking about it in the context of that aspect of timeless as well. To be able to recognize that the timely is about, you know, information. So when you click on that site, you are basically, you're a consumer. Well, you're part of the product, really, you know, that is being utilized to get information to be able to market to you more effectively.
Yeah. And when you hear that term, you're the product, not the consumer. What they mean is they are selling you, right?
Yes.
That's what I think sometimes we get lost in what that means, but it means they're selling you, and you're, you know, like you're a package to be given to someone who, you know, and that, and like figuring that out Marketing, is what matters, right?
That kind of thing, to be able to market to you more specifically based on the information we have on the, you know, the searches you do.
Yep.
So like you say, all that information is out there. And yet I'm willing to recognize, from my perspective, you know, I would dare say each generation to a certain degree has had its addictions. Okay. You know, we think of, you know, the 20s, as far as alcohol, the, what was that called?
Prohibition.
The Prohibition. Yes. Yeah. We think of Prohibition, we think of cigarettes and their production, granted longer term, and I think of, and granted, I think of it in terminology of even work, and food addiction, and even sex, of the sexual revolution type stuff, and, the addictions to pornography. I think, there is this timeless dynamic of addiction and what I do to get this dopamine hit to a certain degree, this satisfaction. Right. And so for me, that becomes a part of the timeless. Mm-hmm. And then being able to take, and that's another interesting part about this dynamic in time, is we are now developing a lot of therapy, if you will, around what they call dopamine detox. You follow me? Yeah. Now we have these therapies that are being developed that are helping people recognize, okay, yeah, I'm addicted to this dopamine cycle. Yeah. And that can, and granted, dopamine is a good thing. Yeah. In its design.
Healthy.
Yeah. The way God has designed us, but timely, executives have found a way to make that an addiction.
Yeah.
And I think they're not alone. It's just, that's the addiction of this era. Mm-hmm. And I think in some ways, from my perspective as a parent, we're looking back saying, oh, this isn't just entertainment, And unfortunately, I think, so often in family systems that I see, having my child occupied or entertained by this social media dynamic or a screen allows me more time to address my things, whether you want to call it addiction or not. It allows me more time to work. Yes. It allows me more time to, do things effectively. And I think, and I quote that effectively, because I'm not interrupted. Mm-hmm. I can do whatever I want to do uninterrupted. Yeah. Because my child isn't, interrupting me. They're not being an inconvenience. Mm-hmm. And I think, that becomes a cultural aspect when we see, kids as an inconvenience. Mm-hmm.
And this is also a timeless thing, and that, I think every generation of parents has had something to send their kids to do, right?
Sure.
And we, a lot of older, grandparents age type thing would be like, well, we sent our kids outside to play, and that was a healthy thing. But really, it's that same paradigm of get out of my hair. I need to be effective, like you said. And that was the thing that they sent their kids out to do. And back to the timeless aspect, we look at that nostalgically and think that was better than it is now. I think we'll find out in another generation that, there are trade-offs to both of those things.
Sure.
And kids who are playing on their phones for hours at a time, there's a lot of negative. That's what we're talking about, right? Like, we're definitely talking about the negative. But I also think there's going to be some trade-offs where they're going to learn some things that will benefit them in their life as a result of that. Just like the kids who are sent outside to go play and built forts and all that. Like, they learned some things that were effective in their life. And again, we look at that nostalgically and think that was only healthy. But I've been involved in Celebrate Recovery a long time. The particular area of addiction I hear a lot about is sexual addiction. Mm-hmm. And a very common story I hear from guys who are older than me is, well, me and my friends, in our fort, one of them brought one of their dad's porn to that fort, whatever,
No, I hear
and
you.
so kind of the isolation, sending them off where they're unsupervised. And you also hear about, boys molesting other boys because of that time alone. Like, I'm just saying, it's important to understand the timeless aspect to shooing your kids away to do something.
Yep.
It's always impacted kids in a positive, like sometimes positive ways. And again, I think there's a lot of independence that was learned through kids going off and biking around town and all those things, right?
Yep.
Like, but I also think we nostalgically forget kind of the negative trade-offs to that too, where we left our kids exposed in areas where, where they shouldn't have been. And now we can be more hover parents. Like, we want to see you at all times but we stick you in the corner, staring at a phone.
Yeah.
And you're also unmonitored.
Yep.
You're also exposed to similar types of,
exposure,
predation for one,
Sure.
and exposure to addicting type things, but they can do it in plain sight, but it looks like
it looks safer.
Yes.
And I think, our culture has become, kind of consumed with safety.
Yes.
Because, and we're almost becoming risk averse,
Yeah.
To where there is something beneficial, to developing children to be able to take a risk. I think that, that's a part of where we are seeing such an increase in anxiety, because there is this dynamic of, safety and perfection. And, and that's a difficult thing for, young kids to be able, I can't do that, and we're creating that safety. And granted, I agree with what you're saying 100%. That's kind of where, addictions, aren't new.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the timeless piece, that addiction isn't new. Each generation has its addiction to a certain degree.
Yep.
And like you were alluding to, I'm part of that generation that grew up with too much free time.
Yeah.
But I think our culture has gone the other direction. We know of the predation more than we do. So it's safer for my kid to be in that room and occupied, because I know where they're at.
Yep.
The issue is I don't know who else is out there and who's influencing them right through that screen.
Yep.
And so that's the I appreciate you addressing that. I think you put it to words better than I did in that process of, addiction is one of those timeless things. And I think we can go from one extreme to the other. It's like, just go outside and play, and get out of my hair.
Yes.
But I think, that's when we see kids as a inconvenience, and granted, that's not to say that we have to, this is the other part of it. I think we have to be able to recognize
that sometimes kids are an inconvenience.
and at the same time, boredom is beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think we've grown up to a certain degree, with parents who are motivated, by it's a bad thing if my child is bored.
Right.
And in reality, that's not true. Boredom is a benefit to our bodies, to our minds, the ability to have our minds kind of free float, if you will, and just think, oh, I wonder if I'm looking, what would happen? Those, like you said, those problem solving kind of dynamics that boredom alone can create. And I think, we've taken that to a sense where boredom is bad. And, being able to recognize, okay, yeah, boredom isn't bad. Boredom is healthy. And I think, it's interesting, because I was thinking about it even with my own kids. It's like, I think they learned not to tell me they were bored, because I just, made sure they had, I'll fix that. There's this to do. There's this to do. And I think they learned in some ways how to entertain themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's a dynamic that people who are addicted to screens have not learned that dynamic of how to entertain myself.
It's like a broken, a
it's
broken part of the system
loop. Yeah.
Where they can't. Yeah. And that's, I even find that true for me, right?
Okay.
In the sense where if I'm in line, to me, that's just an opportunity to look at my phone. Like, I'm never going to just sit in line. And I'm, to be perfectly honest, so thankful that that's a thing I can do, right? It's like, you never have to stand in any line or wait in any line and do nothing anymore.
Yeah.
And to me, that is just with the amount of stuff that I have to do in my life, it's like that's a great opportunity for multitasking and checking up my email, or even looking at something entertaining or whatever.
Yeah,
I love that.
Sure,
I love it.
Would you say you're addicted to it though?
I would say it comes and goes.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yep.
Because I realize I don't think we don't like to use the word addiction. Even in this video, they talk about, well, I don't want to use that word because it's too polarizing.
Yes.
And I hear where they're coming from, but at the same time, if it is what it is, that's what we call it.
Yeah.
But I think it does say, oh no, I'm not that.
Yes.
I'm not that bad. I just take my phone out every time I stand in a line.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's something, let's be honest. If it's something, addiction basically it doesn't matter what the thing is. It's my inability not to do it.
Right.
That makes something an addiction. And that's what I'm saying. It can be work. It can be food. It can be volunteering.
That's where I say I could not do it if I wanted to. The classic line. Yes. Yes. The classic line of denial.
Yes.
Yeah.
But being able to recognize, okay, can I stand in a line? Can I wait? Can I sit in my car at a traffic stop, like a flag, or highway construction? Can I sit in my car and just observe? Or do I have to pull out my phone and entertain myself? Because I do believe that's another part of our culture. We have to be entertained. Even as I was thinking about what I may share, that kind of thing. This could be part of the B-roll, ends up. But I was thinking about it in the context of when I used to do intensive in-home. And the one thing that I noticed about the homes that I was in was the inability for quietness. Okay. And I don't mean silence, because silence can mean something completely different. You follow me? But if there is the inability to have quiet in a home or quietness, then there's a certain level of addiction there from my perspective. If we have
Stimulus.
we have to have the TV on, we have to have, music playing. Granted, all those things can be fine. But there again, music in itself creates a dopamine hit, that kind of thing, to where, in this culture, who doesn't have 350 songs on their playlist? You follow me? Because we spend the entire day listening. Or, we have to have the TV on, even if it's something we're not even watching. You follow me? That in itself, from my perspective, is a limited form of addiction. I think, there is this, because if we can't be quiet, okay, we don't have the opportunity to have a timeless conversation. You follow me? Because in my mind, and granted, I like the fact that you use the multitasking, that's sometimes lauded as a beneficial thing. But there is a tremendous amount of inefficiency in my ability to think if I'm trying to do one thing. And granted, a young mind can do this rather quickly, going back and forth between, but it still makes them less efficient about what they're doing. Not that efficiency is the only thing, but we have to recognize that, and that's another dynamic, is the aspect where our attention span, okay, I want to say it's early 2010, I'd say, our attention span has dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds.
My attention span went really low when I couldn't hear through the thing stuck in your throat. So I had to get you a water.
That's all right. I appreciate it.
I was like, I'm not the only one who's having a hard time listening. I bet the listeners are going to have a hard time.
I appreciate that. Not that it necessarily went away, but we made a novel attempt. Yes.
Now you all know we made an effort, so just deal with it. Because Mark's he's gonna push through.
The reality of it is at 8 seconds, okay?
Yeah.
That makes our attention span 1 second less than a goldfish. So there again, B-roll material.
Yeah.
But it is, and you think about how important that is.
Well, I haven't thought about that.
Well, 1 second. Okay. You think about how important that is to having a timeless conversation. Mm-hmm. If my attention span is basically 8 seconds, and then I'm looking to, as you said, well, I haven't thought about that.
Hey. It's been 8 seconds. It's my turn.
It's my turn. But that's the interesting part. Okay, when I think about that, because I know that we have 7 to 10 seconds, or basically that 8 seconds, to make healthy decisions sometimes. Mm. So if I'm automatically, on that lower edge of 7 to 10, I'm hardly taking enough time to make a healthy decision.
Yeah.
I'm already not stuck, but I'm already caught up back in that impulse, that biofeedback loop that keeps me doing the same thing. Mm. The fact that I'm going to spend 10 minutes on Facebook and suddenly it's 2:00 in the morning, I'm suddenly realizing, oh my goodness, where did the time go? How often do you hear that? Mm-hmm. I was just going to do this. And suddenly I realized it was an hour later. This another irony. I forget where it was. I want to say in Europe somewhere. A parents were brought up on charges for starving their child because they had spent so much time online nurturing their online child. You follow me? They had an online entity that they were responsible for, and they actually spent so much time online that their own physical child was neglected and actually passed away. And then they weren't actually brought up on charges. They weren't convicted because they had an addiction.
Oh, wow.
So, but that's the kind of thing that, and that's where I'm saying a lot of this therapy is coming out of, this context of we are so addicted that we don't even realize how much time we're spending. Yeah. But I'm sorry, I want to come back to what you were going to say.
I think I had more than 8 seconds to think about it. And it's a really good thought, and I enjoy thinking about it, but it's not contributing to this conversation.
Okay. No, I didn't
I'm sure it'll come up in a future conversation.
Likely
it's
so.
It's about multitasking and all that, but that's,
okay. I'll put that in a nutshell. It's overrated as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed.
But at the same time, and so that's a part of, what we're learning, what we're recognizing, and, even being able to recognize. And I think it's a contributing factor when I think about that child, as our use of social media goes up, our empathy goes down. Mm-hmm. You follow me?
Yes.
And I think that's another, I'm not saying that hasn't happened before culturally, but we know that based on social media, the more impact I have there, the more my empathy goes down. And I think in some ways, even in I thought of our tech episode or where we talked about, was it technology? Was it about social media? Yeah, it was about social media. And I like that. I likened that image you had of silos.
Yeah.
And how we have social media tends to
isolate us.
Well, yes.
To our silos.
It tends to isolate us, but what we're thinking is we have the thought, the perception that it's uniting us.
Yes.
When when in reality, it is dividing us based on the fact that if you do a search and I do a search, we both get individualized information that feeds us what we want to hear.
Yeah, and you and I might end up in the same bucket, or we might end up in separate buckets, and that bucket becomes more and more self-feeding to the degree, and this is your point, right? That now I'm convinced everyone in the world is like this, and if you're not, you're super weird.
Yes.
And I'm over here in my bucket, or silo, right? The silos. I'm over here in my silo getting the exact same thing. I'm getting only articles that reinforce my beliefs based on things I've already searched, based on comments I liked on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just over and over and over fed this information that says, you are right. You are right.
Yes.
You are smart.
There's
you are
your
good.
dopamine hit.
You are good looking.
We like you.
Yeah, we like you. You're the best. You're on top of the world. All these things. And we're like, but Mark's over there, and he must be the only one on the planet who thinks what he just said. Like, that's insane. And he's thinking, Justin's over here. He must be the only one on the planet. Like, what is wrong with him? Because of these silos we get placed in. And like you said, they have the appearance of being universal.
Yep.
But the reality is they're silos. We're in there along with the others who are like us. But generally, in order to keep you engaged, they keep you with more people who are like you, and they kind of help you figure out how to get rid of those you don't like or voices you don't care for.
Sure.
And they a lot of times, especially in today's culture, it will be framed in the sense of tolerance or offense, right? Like if you're offended by certain material, just tell us and we'll get it right out of here for you, because we care about you.
Yep.
And it's really about, no, we want to keep you engaged, and we want to keep that you in your silo, because that's what keeps you coming back. And it's just very, it's good, good stuff. And then, so all of this, let's come back to what you started with.
Sure. And
in order to get to there, I want to share a little bit, an anecdote from Megan, because she works in a salon, and, she does a lot of, hair for a lot of ladies who are in an older generation than her, because we live in a retirement community. So kind of that generation.
Yeah.
And how often they lament this generation. And they will often say, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you raise your children in this generation, and it is so messed up. And if it were me, I never would have had kids. And just kind of like hand washing the way this generation is, and it's terrible, and the world's going to come to an end, and all this kind of stuff. And, Megan's always trying to bring it back to hope, and ultimately saying, I think we're doing okay. You know what I mean? Like, and there is some differences in this generation, and that's obvious. But let's come back to hope. Why is there hope, Mark?
There's hope because while there may be all of this information out there to keep us in a loop, we have a choice whether we go there or not. That's the way I see it. And the reality of it is we can establish boundaries around this social media time, how much time is spent. The research basically is telling us there's this opportunity, as we're learning, that 2 hours is that window. Okay. Kids who spend more than 2 hours of screen time are far more likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, body image issues, those kind of things. 2 hours is that window. Kids who spent less than 2 hours are far less subject to that mental health dynamic. So for me, that's hope. In other words, we can recognize in the timeliness that social media and technology is here. Now granted, can something happen that wipes out all the electricity? I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but sure, it's possible, but at the same time, for now, it's here.
Speaking of that,
you got another topic?
And the goldfish.
And the goldfish?
Yeah. You said that, the goldfish has certain time, whatever.
Yeah.
We have less than they do.
Yeah.
That's what I was referencing.
Okay.
Anyway, have you heard about people who would go and shoot up a power. What do you call that? The big places.
Oh yeah, like a transformer station.
Yeah, they'll go with their semiotics and shoot them up.
No,
and it's part of this conspiracy of like we're gonna shut down the power grid and it's gonna return the world back to. We're gonna go over there with our ARs and take care of that.
I was thinking more of like a solar flare or something like that,
Yeah.
But either way.
Well, that's a real thing that's happening. So it's just funny about your conspiracy. It's like, but the actual real world impact of that is pretty minimal. It's just super inconvenient for a little bit, especially for authorities. And the thing, just like all things like this, right? They ruin it for everyone else. Like now we're going to have basically, prison walls built around these things. And it's going to be anyway.
Well, I think that's an interesting dynamic though, for another topic. But as AI tends to control more and more of our interaction, if something happens, it's like I'm thinking about we put one of those little electronic door things on our house. We would punch in. It's like what happens is the batteries die. Yeah. Before I just used to keep a key and and I had a mechanic, used to be, well, even with the electrical grid, there used to be a guy, that stood at a gate that was guarding that transformer station or that switch. Now if something electrical happens somewhere, suddenly some things get shut down just because that switch is no longer available. And that's just a part of technology. As we become more reliant on it, it's interesting. I mean, think about it in the context. How many phone numbers do you know?
I know mine.
Do you?
And I know Megan's.
Okay. Yeah.
Those are the only two I need to know.
Yeah. But I'll be honest. I don't know my children's phone numbers.
Same.
That kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, I know my parents. I know more phone numbers from prior to getting a phone than I can still remember certain numbers. I can remember phone numbers of neighbors that no longer exist, that kind of thing. But, I don't know contact. Now so I think that's just another part of our timely dynamic.
I'm trying to remember my childhood phone number.
Oh,
I'm that goldfish. I'm sorry.
Goldfish. That's going to be the new squirrel for us.
That's right. Squirrel, goldfish.
But either way, this concept that, technology is here.
Yeah.
Okay. And 2 hours is that window of being able to say, okay, this we can establish a boundary around. And I think, as parents, it is important for us to be able to recognize we can do that for our kids. Yeah. Are we going to get some pushback? Of course. Yeah. And is your child going to be unhappy with you? Of course. Yeah. But that's why you're a parent and they're a child.
Yeah.
If we're expecting our children to be our friends all the time, then we've already messed up as a parent.
Yeah. You're heading the wrong direction, yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking to myself, I mean, I've struggled with that. I really do.
And
I mean, we still, I think we have decent boundaries, but man, they are hard to hold on to.
Yeah.
Especially as, your kids get older and they have more, logical arguments that you're like, I see why you think that argument is good.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
no, I agree.
And I even feel bad that I'm not going to give you an argument that you feel is adequate.
Sure.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it may not make sense.
I know more
to you.
than you. Yeah. That it does get harder and harder to hold those.
Yeah.
Hold the line.
Yep. And I hear where you're coming from, and I think I erred as a parent. I erred on the other side of that continuum. That basically I was probably too authoritative, at times. Yeah. And I think
it's tough though, that balance.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. And so, just being able to recognize, okay, I need to be able to deal with the issues that are mine. Like that Matthew 7:5, taking the log, the plank out of my own eye to be able to see, to remove the speck from my child's eye type thing. And I think I have
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
And just go right at the
Preach
subject.
It.
If you're struggling with looking at porn on your phone, you're not going to stop your kid from
Exactly.
looking at porn on his phone. You're not going to touch
or something
the subject.
else.
Yeah, I'm just going right at that one because to me that's a very common one that I know of.
Sure.
Is, so many, again, the world that I operate in, I work with a lot of guys and whatever. I'm aware that this is very common. And I think it's kind of a duh thing for most people. Like, I think most people, struggle with looking at porn on their phone sometimes, right? So all I'm saying is that's a big problem to parenting for kids who are on their devices, because why would you say they have to put Covenant Eyes on their phone? Covenant Eyes is a software that helps track what they're doing and make sure that they're not, looking at the wrong stuff, and sends reports to people if they're looking at the wrong stuff. Why would you put that on their phone if there's a chance that someone might say, well, hey, maybe we should do this on everyone's phone?
Sure.
Well, I'm an adult, whatever. Let's not approach that conversation, or let's not, or we might kind of be like, I have a hunch he's looking at porn on his phone, but I can't approach it because questions might come up.
Yeah.
So I think that Matthew 7, kind of that just like you said, if I have that log in my eye, the chance that I'm able to see or deal with the mote, the small speck in my child's eyes, is problematic.
Yes.
Because someone's going to point their finger back at me, and now I have to deal with it.
Yeah. And it might even be my child.
Right. Yeah.
And just as a timely dynamic, I deal with this a lot with weed. It's like, well, who are you to say that I can't? Why is it not good for me? But I know you smoke, that kind, that'll come out in sessions, and it's not that it's not that I'm not aware when there's a essence, in a house, in the room, that kind of thing.
Essence. Nice way to put it. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think as we need to, this is where maybe in some ways it comes back to our boundaries conversation. If we don't have healthy boundaries for ourselves as parents, how do we establish them for our kids, or help our children establish them? If we're not demonstrating what healthy relationship looks like, how do we expect our children to have healthy relationship? Those kind of things. And I think, so often in that authoritative dynamic, there was this aspect, do what I say, not what I do. And now we've come to maybe another dynamic that's basically saying, well, I just can't tell you no because I'm not dealing with it myself.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And so kind of coming back to Megan's conversation, she'll often bring it back to kind of like you started with the timeless aspects to parenting, and how, well, she'll bring up some of the things we talked about, how it used to be this way, but now it's this way. And basically there has new challenges, and we're working through that, and our kids are doing okay. And they're going to have some messed up thoughts based on this particular paradigm they're in now, just like I had messed up thoughts from the particular paradigm I was growing in. And I think coming back to hope, the hope isn't that, oh, it's fine. That's not the hope. The hope is that it's bad like it's always bad. Right? Like there's always going to be sin crouching, at the door.
At the door, sure.
Right? And it's always our job to lock that door and keep it closed. And if somehow we let it in, kick it back out, right? Like that's universal, timeless truth.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter what the generation you're in, it's going to be at the door.
Sure.
And I think the hope is that we have the opportunity there, especially if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, and you have that hope inside you, and you have the Holy Spirit operating within you. Greater is He that's in you than he is in the world, and
we have the power through Christ to transform.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep. And back to the, I referenced this earlier, but Stephen Covey, in the first chapter, his first principle of the 7 principles of highly effective people is proactivity, and what he talks about in that is a concept from Viktor Frankl, even, which is a psychiatrist from a while back who went through the Holocaust. Yeah. He was stuck in a Nazi prison camp, and he realized that they can torture me, but they can't convert my thinking. Sure. They don't have that option, because between stimulus and response, I have the option to choose what I how I respond. Now we get into that 8-second thing, right? Like if you respond within that 8 seconds, you might not be actually choosing.
Sure.
You might be more in that animalistic instinct. And animals don't have a choice to think about their response. They only can respond in instincts, right?
Sure.
So I see a human, I run. And that I don't think about, is that a nice human, you know, or whatever.
Sure.
It's just the instincts kick in where we have that opportunity to decide, is this safe or not? Is this right or wrong?
Yeah.
Is this something should I watch this next YouTube video? Should I click this link? We have an opportunity. And if you feel, you know, you're slipping yourself slipping into that one video turned into 2 hours kind of thing. Maybe one technique is to say, wait 9 seconds after each video.
Sure.
And if you're still, I think I'd like to watch another one, and you can make that decision consciously.
Sure.
Then it's okay.
Yeah.
Because I also think it's important not to decry all of these things, like standing in line looking at YouTube or whatever. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
It can be a bad thing.
It's
important to think about it, you know?
Yeah.
Same thing like with sitting down to look on social media after work. That's not a bad thing.
Sure.
It can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Sitting around to watch TV after work.
Sure.
It's not a bad thing. It can be a bad, right?
Like, and I think you bring up, I like what you shared about, you know, as a parent, you know, our role is to kick it out the door. And I think about it though, in the aspect of technology, and much of that is already in our homes.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's one thing if somebody's outside my house trying to get in.
Yes.
There's a lot of options for that. But if something is in my house and it's become a friend to me, then it's far harder to kick out.
It is.
And I'm not, you know, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm agreeing with everything you say regarding choice, but I think the things that we have made pets, if you will, that are inside our house are far harder to deal with.
Yep.
But yet it just means we need to be able to call it what it is.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's an addiction or whatever, and then deal with it accordingly. And I think that in and of itself still offers hope because there is a choice. There is an opportunity to be able to do something different. And I think there is something to be said for, you know, no matter the era, no matter the timeliness, there is something to be said for having routine opportunities to engage one another as family.
Yes.
And I think there's something, you know, another balance, if you will. If you're going to spend up to 2 hours on FaceTime, you commit to having at least 2 hours or balanced opportunity for face-to-face interaction. Yeah. You know, and I think so often it is this aspect of we just kind of go to our silos and entertain ourselves until the next day comes.
Yeah.
And then, you know, but there are consequences to that as well.
Yep.
And I think so often as parents, we have that ability to say, okay, well, how are you interacting with other people? We need to create boundaries that say, okay, this much time. And then you still go play with the kids, but we know where you're at. It's not, we're getting rid of you, but we're just creating this face-to-face interaction that I learn emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. That's another, you know, dynamic that is, you know, just
being with other people in real life circumstances. Yeah.
Being able to read social cues.
Yeah. I think I'm seeing this with our kids, but in this generation, trying to avoid real life situations and get to their social media life because it's easier. Right? Yeah. And like you said, and it has a lot to do with that emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
Both not having it and or dealing with others who don't, because you know what I mean, where it's like, wow, they said that, they think that, they do that. It's like kind of hard to believe sometimes, but at the same time not, because when you think about their interactions are only with online social media, you know.
No, I hear you. And I think a part of that aspect of when social media increases, empathy goes down. Yeah. There's this inability to really listen to a friend who has an emotional issue.
Yeah.
You follow me? And it became, well, you're just too sensitive.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean it that way. I just texted that.
Yeah.
You know, or you know, I think there is this, it is a dynamic where the empathy goes down and there are consequences that go along with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thinking about you asked me about addiction for me. If it's an addiction, I said it kind of comes and goes. It just made me think about the life cycle of my kids and how when they were younger, they were like kind of just foreign to me, right? Like where a mother, it's kind of the mother's time where they nurtured, they do all this stuff. Okay. And not in all families, but in ours, it was kind of hard to connect with them. And so I'd sit with them and I'd be like, all right, look at my phone. And it became a habit and became addiction to where whenever I was with my kids, I'd pull out my phone and read Twitter.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a thing. And Megan called me out on it several times. Finally, I heard her and I was like, yeah, this has got to stop. And
sure.
I feel like I vastly improved in that area. In fact, you can ask Megan, if she agrees.
You see Megan.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. Yeah. And then, but it comes and goes. It moves from Twitter to something else, or productivity has become another thing where it's like, there's so much to do with my job. I'm always thinking about, I could steal some moments right now to check that email or respond to this person that I need to respond to or whatever. And that becomes its own version of dopamine. Like, oh, I feel a little bit better. I got that checked off my list or whatever. And life cycle of my kids, they're now at the age where two of them have phones.
Sure.
And I see how it feels like when I pick them up from school and the whole way home, they're just on their phone. And it's like, hello,
Sure.
And I'm like, man, that's exactly what I did when they were kids, Now, they weren't hoping I was going to talk to them. They were playing with their Legos or whatever. Doesn't matter.
And yet
it's
maybe there were
that's
times.
Right.
Exactly.
It's very eye-opening to me. And it just makes me go, you know what? It's okay to say this isn't okay. And so I had the conversation like, hey, if I pick you up from school, you don't get to be on your phone the whole way home.
Sure.
I mean, even if we sit in silence, that's fine. But it's just rude to do that to anyone, like to be riding in a car as they bring you somewhere and just be on your phone. And it's like, that's not something we're going to do.
You know what?
That's a boundary.
Justin, do you know what that's called?
Boundary?
No.
I don't know.
When someone has too much to do that they have to be on their phone.
Addiction. No, I don't know.
It's actually I'm contributing here a little bit.
Good.
It's called fubbing.
Fubbing.
It's basically phone snubbing, because you have so much to do on your phone that
fubbing.
If we enter the elevator at the same
PHUBBING. That's
fubbing.
a good term.
So it's basically I'm too busy with my stuff to interact with you when we step onto an elevator together.
Yeah.
So it's just,
Yeah.
So you feel fubbed when you're a child.
That's right.
Yeah.
And, like I said, Megan's worked on me a lot about this because of in our own relationship. So we'd go out on a date and I'd be checking my phone every once in a while. It's like, it didn't seem bad. And then looking back, it's like, ew, just that I did that. But her saying, hey, don't do that. And then, we've even flipped the script where I've said, hey, you said I couldn't do that. Why are you texting your sisters? That's the same thing. Like in her mind, it's perfectly wholesome, right?
Yeah.
But it's like I couldn't have a conversation. And it went back like we both had this thing. We both were fubbing each other at different times for various reasons. And in our mind, it was like, well, this is fine and okay. This isn't about you. I'm not doing this to you. This is about the thing I have to do. And it's like, no. It is it is an offensive thing. And anyway, I brought up the conversation with my kids because I think they can be mirrors. And if you have that blessing in your life of having a child, they can mirror your own behavior. You can start to see, I need to moderate my own behavior because, I see it mirrored in them, or I see how it can impact them. And
sure,
that can be a great motivator. It certainly was for me as well as Megan, in our conversation. So
no doubt.
A little bit of hope, maybe.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of hope in the process of when we're able to recognize that there are still some timeless dynamics, face-to-face interaction, being able to encourage one another, knowing that, yes, even in relationship, there is such a thing as healthy jealousy. We think of jealousy as a psychotic thing so often, well, you're just too jealous. But there is a healthy, it just means, our priorities are off.
Yeah.
And being able to reestablish some of those in a timely, healthy, timely manner that says, okay, what does God have to say about this?
Yeah.
Because I think those truths are still evident. And that becomes another one, that just kind of reinforces, okay, am I willing to deal with what's in my own eye in such a way that says, okay, we can deal with this together. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes healthy families. And I think, from my perspective, having a healthy relationship, healthy marriage, creates healthy families. As you describe your relationship with Megan, as you guys have a healthy relationship, you're able to, develop a healthy family. And that's just a timeless thing. And yet I think, some of this stuff puts the family very much at risk, culturally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So that being said, I appreciate you allowing me the time to share.
Oh man, that was good stuff. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for stealing some of your material and
it's
giving us some of the B-roll material.
Yeah, it's not stealing anything. It's just out there. There's and like you say, I'm saying, if you're wrestling, if there is hope, there's a ton of information out there, and just being able to identify and live in such a way that says, okay, if somebody's noticing this about me, it's probably real, and I may need to deal with it. And if I need to get some help, and in that process, there's help out there.
Yep.
I don't have to continue, in that addiction, whatever it might be.
Maybe in the show notes we can link some of the research and stuff that you've been digging into.
Maybe.
Or resources, like even in this
Definitely.
event you go to, I'm sure there's going to be resources offered.
Yeah,
Maybe
there's age appropriate,
I know Covenant Eyes is one that I'll link to. But just anything like that. Maybe we can... Yeah. In terms of offering hope, we can say, but here's some tools too.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to sound that I wasn't willing to share information.
Mark
it's just
doesn't want to share.
No,
so I'll do it.
It's not that I don't want to share. It's like in that process, it's like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
With so much info. That's the abundance of information. The ability to say, okay, where did that actually come from? Because once it goes into my notes, it's like, I'm not a real stickler for... I like to give credit where credit is due, but if it's, just information that's out there, I'm not always a linear person when it comes to saying, oh, that's exactly where that information came from.
That's all right.
But that's how I see it.
That's how he sees it.
That's right.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.